Preface to the Dharmapadam by Shankha Yogacharya Swami Hori Harananda Aranya. In compiling this work, care has been taken to make the Sanskrit verses resemble as closely as possible to their originals in Pali. There are many cases in which only change of the words into their Sanskrit forms was necessary, but in others some alterations were to be made to bring them within the rules of Sanskrit prosody. The doctrine of nirvana is very little understood by modern scholars. Dr. Rajendralal Mitra, in speaking about nirvana, says, "I had made long extracts in illustration of how it is at one time made equivalent to eternal matter, a primordial sika, or the abode of eternal bliss, or exemption from transmigration, and at another time a positive nothing or nihility. But as I find I would be, after all, in the same predicament as honest Cicero, when he said, 'Though I have translated the Timaeus of Plato, I do not understand it.' Refer Lalita Vistara, page 31. Even bhikshus and sannyasins of the present time understand very little about it, and very few among them strive for its attainment. Therefore, a resume of the subject will not be out of place here. Nirvana and punya, that is the higher dharma and the lesser dharma, as we find in this book and in the older books of rishis on the subject, are essentially the same. The names nirvana, vimoksha, kaivalya, shanti, mukti, Tibetan Mia Nan Las Das Pa, that is passed away from misery and sorrow, are indiscriminately used by both the Arshas, that is the followers of the rishis, and the Buddhists. The means for the attainment of nirvana are the same in both creeds. In Dharmapada, chapter 10, verse 16, we find Shraddha, that is love and admiration for the path, Shila, or virtuousness, Virya, or incessant effort, Smriti, or constant remembrance, Samadhi, or state of meditation in which the object meditated upon is only apprehended and when all other apprehensions are absent, and Dharma Pravinischaya, or the wisdom about higher dharma, are spoken of as the means by which nirvana can be attained. Patanjali also says the same thing. In Pada 1, aphorism 20 of his book, Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, and Prajna are spoken of as the means. The minor virtues necessary for nirvana, such as Maitreyi, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, Ahimsa, Satya, Brahmacharya, etc., though counted in different sets by the Arshas and the Buddhists, are practically the same. Hence it must be clear that since the path is the same, the goal must be the same. Buddha defines nirvana as a state of the greatest bliss, Nibbanam Paramam Sukham, Natti Santi Param Sukham. By greatest bliss, no one can mean total annihilation. By such words as Shunya Rupa, like void, etc., some sects of the Buddhists would have us believe that nirvana is total annihilation. But as we shall see afterwards, these sects were of later growth. Nirvana is the last stage of samadhi, in which the chittam, that portion of the mind which knows, wills about, and retains the impressions of non-self objects, Vedana, Vijnana, etc. of Buddhists, being without the least activity, returns to its inconceivable potential state, while the self-conscious principle in us seems unclouded by non-self apprehensions. This particular state of pure self-consciousness may be shown to be the state of the greatest bliss, but space will not allow us to expand on the matter. To make the subject clear, we shall explain it according to the light of the Sankhya philosophers, who are the most cogent of arguers. According to the Shamkhyas, the ultimate state of all non-self existences, that is matter and mind, is avyakta, that is the indiscrete or potential state. In the phenomenal state, we find in every phenomenon some form of activity. Activity is followed by apprehension and is preceded by its particular potential state, as distinguished from avyakta, the general potential state of all. Shamkhyas name the activity rajas, or the mutable principle. The following apprehended state, sattvam, or sentient principle, and the particular potential state, tamas, or the insentient principle. The ultimate state being inconceivable, they explain all phenomena by sattvam, rajas, and tamas. There is no beating about the bush in it. The ordinary absurd notions about matter and mind are done away in this view. Though these three principles explain the non-self existences, the consciousness of pure self is not explained by them. Activity may bring about the sentient state, but can never be the sole constituent of it. In fact, sentient state is activity illuminated. The illuminant in this case must be a self-conscious principle. This the Shamkhyas term Purusha or Chit, that is, a state of being in which self cognizes only self. It is impossible to enter into the spirit of Indian philosophy without a clear notion of what Chit means. There is no English word which fully expresses its meaning. Our ordinary personality is a confection of three feelings, namely, I know, I act, and I retain, by the retentive faculty. These three feelings imply correlation with extraneous non-self stimulation. When by a peculiar state of meditation or samadhi, our connection with extraneous stimulation is broken, when we cease to know, to will about, and to retain the impressions of all non-self objects, then that state of knowing principle in us is called Chit. Chit may be termed the conscious element. Our ordinary self-consciousness, being dependent on non-self stimulations, is intermediate between the conscious element and the unconscious element, that is the avyakta or the primordial state of non-self existence. This intermediate state of our ordinary self is termed buddhisattva by the Arshas and Vijnana or Vijnana Skandha by the Buddhists. This becomes extinct in nirvana, but not the metemperic state of consciousness or Chit. This state is the greatest bliss of the Buddhists and Kaivalya or Chidrupa of the Arshas. Chit may be defined as the metaphysical state of consciousness. When there is no activity of the Chittam, either from internal or from external causes, and when the causes of activity are removed once for all, the Chittam permanently goes to the indiscrete state. This is nirvana. In it, therefore, a part of us in the ordinary sense, becomes extinct, leaving the conscious element in us untainted, as it were, by all non-self apprehensions. So the nihilistic and non-nihilistic definitions of nirvana are both compatible. Nirvana is not a mere imaginary summum bonum. Instructions with minute details and rationale for its culture are to be found in all the philosophical systems. Buddha did not say anything new about the culture of nirvana, but he did what is infinitely more difficult. He succeeded in attaining it. It was by his success that he could set mankind in his doctrine. In these transcendental matters, precept is of little value. It is by being a living example that any great impression can be made. Buddha, being the perfect example of his cult, did not need have recourse to metaphysical speculations to impress his followers, nor is metaphysics at all suitable for a popular faith. It is therefore that Buddha chiefly taught the art or the practical aspect of nirvana. In later times, after about the prophetic 500 years, the nihilistic and other creeds began to crop up among his followers. His poetic biographers of this age made Buddha speak their own notions and connected him with possible and impossible merits. During this time of great prosperity, the admirers of Buddha, as is usually the case, began to differentiate him from old teachers and claimed originality for him. But Buddha did not himself do so. In Tevijja Sutta and Brahmadhammika Sutta, for instances, he cites the Brahmanas of old as models of virtue. After prosperity came decline. The example of Buddha became less and less effective as a motive power. As time passed on, his followers became degenerated, and many fanciful philosophies divided them into various sects. Buddhism was at this time like a grand mansion of which the dwellers were poor. During this time, public opinion in India began to veer round preachers who preached in the name of the rishis. These Arsha revivalists did not refute the pure teachings of Buddha, but chiefly of the latter-day Buddhists. Nirvana is for the few. The generality of mankind can only practice punya. Punya is the lower rungs of the great ladder which goes up to nirvana. By punya, happiness in this and in the next world is gained. In this matter also, there is no difference between the Buddhists and the Arshas. Buddha, it is true, spoke of ritualism, yagyas, etc. as possessing little merit, but so did the Arshas also. For instance, we find in the Mahabharata that a single truth is of greater merit than 1,000 Ashvamedha sacrifices. It is also to be noted that in his teachings, Buddha said that ritualism is of comparatively little consequence, but did not altogether put it beyond the pale of meritorious actions. Vide Brahmadhammika Sutta. Buddha is blamed by many critics for fostering monasticism and mendicancy. Abuse of monasticism is no doubt undesirable, but Buddha is not to be found fault with for it. It is the innate tendency of every human institution to degeneracy which is really at fault. A bhikshu with the culture of dharma, which is enjoined by Buddha, is a veritable blessing to society. Abundance of such examples to follow, even if they can only be followed by the majority of mankind at a distance, is of far greater efficacy in improving the moral tone of a race than all the secular repressive measures. Buddha said that it is better to swallow red-hot balls of iron than for a bhikshu without adequate self-restraint to live upon public charity. But however pure the source, what stream flowing to a distance can help losing its purity? From this it will be evident that Buddhism is not a different religion, but a sect of Arshaism, or what is inaccurately termed Brahmanism, founded by a great leader. They are the branches of the same tree, and though after lapse of ages they look like different trees, yet the same roots nourish them both. Dharmapada is in all probability like many portions of the Tripitaka, the original teachings of Buddha. For detailed information on the subject, the reader is referred to Professor Max Muller's preface to his translation of the Dharmapada in the Sacred Books of the East, Volume 10. Its simple and forcible language, its ennobling effect upon the mind, its pure and non-sectarian teachings prove that the author of Dharmapada must have been a great man who himself could do what he taught.